Good evening, everybody. This will call to order the October 24th Ways and Means Committee Subcommittee meeting. Would all please rise and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll of the members of the subcommittee?
Roll call of the members of the Ways and Means Subcommittee. Councilor Keefe.
Here.
Here. Councilor Novoselsky.
Here.
Here. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Sereno is absent. Council President Visconti.
Here.
Here. And Chairman Rizzo.
Here.
Here. Quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're here tonight. There's only one order of business, but of course it's a very significant order of business. It is the conversation around a $29.5 million bond authorization for the eminent domain taking of Wonderland, the former site of the Wonderland Dog Track, which has been topic of discussion for the new high school. What I'd like to do, I do see some obvious members of the school committee, the superintendent's here, the mayor is here, along with other people that are available, I would imagine, to answer some questions if members of the committee have them. So what I'd like to do, I'll hold my comments to speak last, as typically that is what the chair of the subcommittees will do, and call on members of the committee first, and then other councilors wishing to be heard or asked any questions of people that are here. I'm assuming that people that are here are willing to answer questions as they may arise from members of the city council. So with that, I'll start with members of the committee. Does anybody have any comments or questions for anyone that's in attendance here, or just general comments pertaining to the bond authorization? Members of the committee first.
I like you would, I mean, I'll probably have a few questions that come up, but I would love to hear from the members in the audience in regards to just what we had asked over the last meeting. I know that there was some questions from the auditor regarding the expense over time and how that would affect us, and just give a little more details, and then I would probably go questions from there.
Yeah, I'd like to, I mean, if there's specific questions for members of the audience, then certainly we can ask them, but I just don't want to call, I don't want to just call people up and have them talk about the project. This is our subcommittee meeting, and I want to see where everybody is headed with it. So if members of the committee do have questions, I know I've got several, but if there are other members of the committee that have questions or comments, then certainly, you can make them heard now. Yes, sure. Go ahead, Councilor.
So, Mr. Chairman, which Councilor?
Well, I was going to let Councilor Keefe continue on. He sounded like he wanted to make a comment, but if, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple brief questions. I assume, I'm making an assumption here, the person not the auditor, but the appraiser, is this the appraiser that's here? Someone with the appraisal firm? No? Okay, well, maybe Mr. Mayor, if you could offer, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want to put you on the spot a little bit. Just question in regards to the actual appraisal, and then some, there's some safeguards regarding that, and then I would have some comments in general of the project. But ultimately, it looks like the appraisal came out to be approximately $29 million, right? And I just had a question in regards to the appraisal company that we used, and what was some of their, why were they recommended, and what's some of the recent track record in regards to the history of recent appraisals, and where have they fallen in regards to what they've suggested would be the price, and then what was the eventual price. That's pretty much the question. I just want to see how good they actually are.
Yeah. So I'll let Mr. Leonard speak a little bit more to Bob Coleman, but I can say that there are kind of preeminent people around eminent domain. The preeminent lawyer is Mr. John Leonard that we have with us today, and he gave the council a briefing in executive session, and I want to be really clear about one thing, that I know that the city, myself, all of you are assuming some risk with the Wonderland project and the Wonderland site. But please know, and I think if anything was taken away from that executive session that we had when we dove into this 300 or so page document that's been available to all of you, I will say, and that was made clear at that executive session. This is made available, that we do our due diligence. And everything that we've done in the lead up to where we are today was built around mitigating the risk that we know that we're walking into. And so mitigating that risk means hiring the best people. And so John is a lawyer that's point for the city, but Bob Coleman and Larry Beal are the preeminent folks in the region around appraisals and land usage. Larry actually worked on a couple of projects in the city as well. So Bob Coleman, our appraiser, came as a reference to John, but his extensive background is, I think, part of this document, and happy to kind of let John talk a little bit more about Bob's expertise.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasure to be before you. A pleasure to talk about Bob Coleman. Bob Coleman is one of the most preeminent real estate appraisers in Massachusetts. He's been appraising properties in Massachusetts for over 40 years. He has testified in court for over 35 years. He's a licensed appraiser for 40 years. He holds the professional designation of senior real estate appraiser. He has taken 50 or 60 courses in real estate appraisal. He has one of the highest designations that's available. Bob has testified and appraised raw land, residential land, commercial land, industrial land, and special purpose properties. He's has also, let me tell you some of his clients that he's testified for and prepared appraisals for. Simon Properties, Digital Equipment Company, Boston Edison Company, Sunoco, Mobile, New England Telephone Company, Ogden, Suffolk Downs, of all people, New Boston Garden, General Dynamics, Olympia in York, the McCourt Company, Boston Globe, the Mugar Group, Messina Enterprises, AD Makepeace, they're big developers on the South Shore. He has done appraisals for institutions. In fact, I can submit to you, rather than boring you with a lot of this stuff, I can submit to you his professional designations and his experience, a list of it, but it's attached to his appraisal report. For institutional appraisals, Brandeis University, Bentley College, Boston College, Massachusetts General Hospital, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, Partners Healthcare. Law firms he's testified for: Hale & Dorr, Rackham & Sawyer and Brewster, my law firm, Masterman, Calbert and Tully, law offices of Peter Flynn, Hill & Barlow, Mintz Levin, one of the biggest firms in Boston, Nutter, McLennan and Fish, Brown, Rudnick, Ropes and Gray, Lynch G. Simone and Nyland, Piper Rudnick. He's testified for numerous governmental agencies: City of Waltham, City of Boston, City of Cambridge, City of Melrose, City of Worcester, Town of Burlington, Town of Framingham, City of Lynn, City of Somerville, City of Newton, Town of Andover. I'll just try to cut this a little bit short.
Mr. Chairman, and through you, and Mayor, through you, and I certainly appreciate it. I think it goes without being said that this appraiser has a track record and has an unbelievable resume. More specifically, the question I just wanted, and I'm not questioning his experience, certainly not, is the experience with eminent domain takings, and also with your firm. It seems that you Mayor Arrigo mentioned, you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and also protecting the city, because no one here wants to not, and I know that everyone has a vested interest, is more recently with eminent domain takings, have you or you're talking about Mr. Coleman, regarding appraisals, where has the margin of error been? Is it 5%, 2%, 1%, spot on? Can you give me some sort of an example in regards to recent eminent domain offerings or appraisals that have come out and where they've ended up?
Well, that's a difficult question because because of COVID, the Superior Court on eminent domain is 3 or 4 years behind. But Bob Coleman, generally speaking, is well recognized as a moderate to conservative appraiser. There are some appraisers out there who are a little more aggressive in their valuations. Bob isn't. His uncle, Martin Coleman Jr., Martin Coleman Sr., was the premier appraiser in Massachusetts for 40 years. Bob learned the profession by carrying his bag. Bob he testified before this committee about 3 weeks ago, describing his appraisal report. He's articulate, he's moderate, he's extraordinarily thorough and detailed. The appraisal report that he submitted in this case is 254 pages long with about 60 pages of addenda. His report is extraordinarily detailed, it's logical, it's persuasive, and I think it's a testament to the effort that he's put in on this appraisal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. I know we've got other counselors that may want to speak, so we really have to kind of move along. Did that answer your question, Councilor Keefe? Councilor Morabito.
Thanks.
Can I just make one point on that? And I know there's a reference to conservative and more free-wielding. Conservative meaning the highest price that we would have to pay, right? Just so everyone, that's very clear to everyone that he wasn't lowballing this number in a conservative way.
Councilor Morabito.
Thank you. For the most part, I believe in executive sessions, we had a lot of opportunities to answer a lot of questions, and a lot was answered. One thing I'm noticing now, reviewing this notice that we just got, are the debt service schedules. That's what my question is on. Are these rates, these interest rates, are they locked in? Say, for instance, if we do not vote for approval tonight and we go back to the drawing board, does the interest rates work the same way as mortgage interest rates? Do they go up?
The interest rates on the schedules that you've received today are strictly pro forma schedules. They're based upon assumptions. When we go to sell bonds, it's sold on the open market. So it is somewhat like a mortgage. However, bonds are bid out and the companies then bid on them and we take the lowest bid. So we gave you multiple scenarios for the land purchase itself. There's 4 different scenarios. There's 2 scenarios based upon a 30-year debt schedule, one at 4.5% and one at 5%. And then we've also run it at 25 years, and we assume on a shorter debt schedule, we have better rates, so we have 4.25% and 4.75%. But the short answer is we won't know the rates until we actually put the bonds out to market and they're bid on, and then we'll go. Again, much like Mr. Leonard said, we want to bring you numbers that we think are conservative, meaning, we hope the rates are on the higher side and they get bid down so that we'd have more, favorable news once the bonds are sold, as opposed to surprise that they're at 6%. So they're not set as of right now, Counselor, but these are our best estimates based upon the current market.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get to you, Councilor McKenna. I just don't know if Councilor Powers or Councilor Novoselsky have any questions. Okay, Councilor Novoselsky is yielding. Anybody else wishing to be heard? Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concerns that I'm going to speak of are directed to the mayor and to the financial secretary, our financial secretary. And they deal with two aspects of the bond authorization. One being the flooding on the Wonderland site, and the other being with the traffic. Those are my two major concerns, and I'm sure that they're the concerns of the people that I represent in the Ward 5 area. As a matter of fact, my home is approximately maybe a tenth of a mile from the Wonderland dog track, okay? And, you know, we're all aware of the, you know, $29.5 million charge for the property, or what we're gonna put it out there at. My concern is, what about the flooding down there? Is that gonna be addressed as it should be and hasn't been for an awful long time? I know Mayor Arrigo, to his credit, he did spend a significant amount of money down there. We cleaned the Eastern County ditch. We went into the Bay Road area and the Oak Island area. We done in my own area, and we did a tremendous amount of work down there, making sure that the flooded waters and the heavy rains could get out to the B&M tracks to make sure that the people were not getting water and sewerage into their homes. And I can say this honestly this evening. Since we started this project, when I first got elected 20 years ago, I don't think first of all, I haven't had one question on sewerage down there, and a couple of small on the flooding, okay? And I think this is, you know, a testament to the work that we've been down there. However, there is still an awful lot of work left to be done down there, okay? And I would hope, and the mayor's here this evening, I would hope that he would give me a firm commitment that this work will continue, and I would hope that our financial secretary here would also give me a commitment that the monies will be available down the road to complete these projects. It's not a nice thing when you come home for dinner at night after you've worked 8, 9, 10 hours and find your home flooded or sewerage and, you know. And there are some minor instances of that right now. And what I'd like to get tonight is a commitment from the mayor and the financial secretary that this will be addressed in the future. And I'm glad to see the superintendent here this evening also. And I have something I'd like to throw out there that she may be able to work out. I'm not sure. As you know, there's a lot of traffic down there. So much traffic that Catherine Clark, Congresswoman, saw fit to dedicate $4 million to design a commuter rail station down there. And that commuter rail station is designed to take traffic off of 1A. It's, you know, it's horrendous down there in the mornings, okay? What I'd like to ask the superintendent, is there any way, and I know you don't have that, I just want to put the thought out there for you. Is there any way that we can somehow change the hours or even slightly to make sure that the kids coming in, if that is voted on this evening, that the kids coming in there to attend school are not compromised by a lot of traffic down there? There's enough traffic down there now, okay? And these are two of the things that are going to affect my decision this evening on voting for or against the authorization. And I'd like to leave that up to the mayor now.
Counselor, thank you for your comments. Obviously, you know, I appreciate your passion for for your ward and for the neighborhood, especially a neighborhood that has been challenged with the effects of, neglect of our infrastructure. And I think that you probably more than most understand the commitment that we've made, in terms of infrastructure and improving that. And I think it's really important for people to understand when we build a high school at Wonderland, we're not going to say there's no more money to do anything again. There will be, and there will continue to be capacity, and the financial officer can speak to this. And with the development that's happened in the city, with the new growth that we've seen, and obviously our commitment to quality of life improvements and infrastructure, especially close to low-lying areas like the lower end of Revere Street, is critically important. We know that those are investments that need to be made for the quality of life for residents. And so you have my commitment that those investments will continue. We're going to do all that we can to continue to draw down state and federal funding to be able to help us pay for those things. This week we're going to have an exciting announcement about another state grant that the city got. So there's been no shortage of focus on making sure that those investments not only have happened pretty recently, but that they continue on and are sustainable for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so you have my commitment that that work will continue, and it will continue with the great team that I have around me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make one comment, if I may. I know that when we did Rumney Marsh Academy, prior to that, there was a tremendous amount of flooding down on Eastern Avenue, Tapley Avenue, True Streets, and all of the intersecting streets with that building down there. And I know one of the things that we did down there was to put in, I believe it was 3 24 or 36-inch drains running out of that area, under the American Legion Highway, down past the Paul Revere School, out into, not the Eastern County, but the Central County ditch. And I know that was a tremendous, I haven't had anybody call me and talk about flooding down there since that school was built. And I credit that to the administration at the time, and to all of the other individuals involved that were working toward that goal. And I would hope, and I've just heard it from the mayor now, and I certainly appreciate that, I would hope that the same commitment and most vigorous manner would continue once, if a high school is being built down there, being started down there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
May I just, the superintendent?
Councilor, okay, because there's several other people that
No,
need to
I
speak.
understand that.
I think I've given a lot of latitude.
I'll be very quick. I think in terms of the traffic, one of the reasons that we see an advantage at the Wonderland site over the existing site is because the existing site is so congested already, and it's in a very dense neighborhood area. One of our goals with Wonderland is to actually have roadways around the building that would remove the school-based traffic out of the regular traffic that's happening in that area. And we would have long entryways for parents who are bringing their kids in to drop them off, and separate roadways for buses. Right now, we have parents and buses on the same one roadway into the existing high school, and that's what creates some of the congestion there. So that's certainly part of the plan. In addition to that, we're really excited about the opportunity to have the commuter rail right adjacent to a high school where our students can jump on and go to downtown Boston and do hands-on internships, or connect with the different unions that are mostly located in the Boston area, and really create new opportunities for our students. But traffic is definitely a priority in our process here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Council President Visconti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start off by really addressing the major concern that I have, okay, with what is I consider a major concern on my behalf is the delta of what the potential cost can be, okay, of the existing site above and beyond the $30 million. So if I can have maybe Mr. Leonard, since he is an eminent domain attorney, if I can ask him, and I know we have some, we have the executive session, you know, some information that we really can't discuss. But I guess the biggest concern I have, because when you look at this, okay, there is a delta of right now, if we take the Wonderland site, okay, it's costing, without considering what the lawsuit, and I'm saying lawsuit because I am gonna go, I don't like to assume, but I bet Attorney Leonard wouldn't disagree with me to say that we are going to get sued, if that's not correct. Is it fair to assume that, Attorney Leonard?
I think it's a fair assumption, but I say this.
Yeah.
We've had meetings with the ownership of the subject property. They've been very favorable and friendly meetings. They're represented by an outstanding eminent domain lawyer whom I know extraordinarily well. It seems to me there are alternatives to litigating this issue in the Superior Court. There are mediations that can be had, sort of like arbitrations, but not binding, but can go for 2 or 3 days before a retired Superior Court judge who has experience in eminent domain to try to bridge the difference and come to a reasonable accord. I know this, the history of this property for the last 10 years, the ownership has not been able to sell any of this property for any amount of money whatsoever, despite innumerable opportunities to try to do so. I think they're realistic. I don't think they want 5 years of litigation. This is the most complicated eminent domain case I've ever seen in my life, dealing with all of the environmental and structural and physical conditions of the site, the regulating of the site. To try to develop this site would take 3 to 5 years for a non-public group. So that my hope would be that reason would reign and some type of a mediation could bring about a resolution in a fair manner.
Well, that would make my, I mean, obviously, if it was something that we can obviously hear sooner than later, that would make my concerns obviously go away. My major concern here is the number that we're asking to vote on this and on the Wonderland site, okay, and not knowing what that number, okay, if in fact we do get sued, okay, what that number can be and how much that can be. So I'm not going to make that assumption, okay, but I can't assume that it's going to be $20 million, $30 million, $100 million. I don't know that number. And what alarms me to this is that I am making a decision based on an unknown, okay? And yes, while I appreciate the appraiser's confidence in his resume, I understand that, okay? But there is still no guarantee to the city that we, 3 to 5 years down the line, okay, may be stuck with an additional $30, $40 million bond, a bill that we're gonna have to pay. And that is alarming to me, you know, and that really, at the end of the day, that's a major concern for me. And maybe the mayor or whoever can answer that. And then I can follow up with some questions with Mr. Viskey as well as Mr.
Let
Day.
me mention two things.
Yes.
Number one, the principal comparable sale that Mr. Coleman relied on in this particular case is the sale of Suffolk Downs. That property was 152 acres. It sold on February 23rd, 2017. The price was $155 million on a per square foot of building area. That was $9.57. Mr. Coleman's valuation here is $15 per square foot of building times the area of the buildings, $1,950,000, it gets you to $29,250,000. I think that's,
Agreed, but.
that's helpful.
I understand and I
Let me
respect
give
that.
you, let me give you another.
But there's also in that appraisal that the square footage, correct me if I'm wrong, on a couple of different sites were a lot more than that.
I don't
Have
see
you not
that,
mentioned that?
I don't see that in the appraisal. I think the.
I think the square footage on a couple of other properties that were mentioned.
You may be right, but I don't have it that way. But let me tell you this, as a general rule, if you have two good appraisers, and you're gonna have them here, and you have two good lawyers, you'll have at least one good lawyer on the other side, and you've got a fair judge, and you've got a reasonable jury, if the pro tanto in this case is $29.5 million, let's call it $30 million. If I were the plaintiff and I doubled the pro tanto at $60 million, I would be jumping for joy on this case with the enormous disabilities that this property has. I would jump for joy. To suggest that this would be a triple case, triple of $30 million, I think is in fantasy land. It's dealing with Halloween concepts. The more normal circumstance, if both parties present good cases, you're going to take the $30 million plus the $60 million, and they're going to add them and divide them by two, and you're going to be at $45 million. And if you ask me where this case is going to go and where the exposure is, it's not $60 million. I don't think it's $50 million. I think it's somewhere between $40 and $45 million, assuming that the jury didn't believe Mr. Coleman and everything he said.
Okay, and if I can just follow up,
Is
if
that
you don't
helpful?
mind. You answer the question, I appreciate that. You said that there have been some friendly conversations between you as well as the owner and the attorneys. The discussions in terms of maybe coming to a resolution before that, because my concern is that once we dive in, we're all in, okay? And the unknown, it would be really a good understanding or maybe beneficial to us to know where they stand, okay? I'm not sure if there have been any discussions, and we can have those discussions after the meeting.
In executive
In
session.
executive session, but it just not knowing where they stand. And while I appreciate your history, and I know the mayor has put together a good, solid team, and I'm assuming the owner of Wonderland is going to do the same, like you said, I just have a major problem with the unknown. Because if, in fact, that number is $40 million more, and we could have avoided that, okay, then that's on this city council. And that's the biggest problem I'm having right now.
Without breaching confidences and without going into executive session now.
I understand.
The owner of the property would like to segregate some portion of the property, 8 to 10 acres, for a private development of the site. And then the rest of the site could be negotiated and possibly mediated. There's no agreement that could take place, but that is the suggestion, and that's where we're trying to go with it. The only difficulty you're going to find here is one of timing, because to negotiate with a mediation, to try to get a judge at this point in time, have him read appraisal reports like these, you're probably talking a couple of months. And I don't know that you have that.
But here's the thing, Mr. Leonard, I don't think we're going to get to a number tonight. I don't think we're going to know what the number is. I understand where Councilor Visconti's trying to go, what's our total upside or downside, but I don't think anyone in this room is going to make that decision. we appreciate what you've experienced in the past and what you think it might be, but, you know, I think what Councilor Visconti is still getting at is that there is still an unknown here. If there was not an unknown, then why won't we just negotiate and pay them? Sit down instead of an eminent domain taking, sit down and say, okay, we determined it was 20, you've already had meetings, let's buy it from them. But apparently that hasn't been settled. So that's why we're gonna do the eminent domain taking, and then we're gonna see where the chips fall. And that, I think, where some councilors are having some issues.
I think part of the difficulty, without being argumentative,
Oh, and I don't mean to
No,
be
no, no,
argumentative,
not with
but this
you.
is a big decision
No,
for the
not with you.
taxpayers of the city.
not being argumentative with the ownership. The ownership has experienced some issues as to whether this case should be tried, settled, or developed, what they should do. One of the partners in this partnership, one of the three people, Mr. Fields, who was a very experienced fellow, withdrew from the partnership, and a new member of the partnership came in. I'm not sure, from what I know, that there's unanimity among the partnership as to how to proceed on this case. And I think that's been the primary reason that we haven't either effected a mediation or been able to settle the case at this time. And I think what they're concerned with is they have a partial deal on the table for 8 to 10 acres. They're trying to get the city to accept that proposal so that they'll get the fruits of their investment negotiations. And at that point in time, I think they're willing to sit down and discuss the rest of the case.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Visconti, anything else that you want to add?
I'm
'Cause
going to
there's several
elaborate a
other-
little further, but I'll give some other people. Brian, do you,
think
Mr.
Brian-
Mayor, do you want to elaborate a little bit? if
Uh,
that's what-
quickly, and
Through you to the mayor, obviously.
We've talked about risk a lot, and but I think I want to frame all of this in the biggest risk, and I told you this, Mr. President, earlier today, the biggest risk that I see is that we're not building a school for the kids. And so when although there's no guarantee that what the delta may be, or there's no guarantee that we come to an agreement and have a friendly taking, although that's, I think, what generally we want to see happen. On the converse side, there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to draw down the $150 or $170 million from MSBA if we don't move forward. You know, we've been at this for 2 years. We've already sunk $2 million, and I hear a lot about watching out for the taxpayers, but at the end of the day, we've been through this. We picked a site. This conversation isn't about a site right now, it's about a school. And so the decision before you is to whether or not we're gonna build a new high school. And I've heard time and time again that people wanna build a high school. Well, we are on a path to build a high school. If we don't take the path that we're on, and if we divert from it, if we move backwards, we're only hurting the taxpayer. And we're putting at risk $100 to $150, $170 million in state money that will help us build a new high school. So I think it's important to lay that out, put all the politics aside, and recognize we've done our due diligence when it comes to having a team that is competent and able to say, this is what this property's worth. We will have parallel conversations, which we've been having, and we have leverage right now. I know somebody said, just make a deal. Well, if I just made a deal, I would be putting, again, the taxpayers on the hook for potentially more money. So I'm not gonna do that. We're gonna do our due diligence. We've done our work. It's been 2 years in the making. Actually, I think we started the process of building or trying to build a new high school in the prior administration. So this has been going on for nearly a decade. We are at the point where the rubber meets the road. And I just put that out there. I know we may not vote on this tonight, but as we move forward, and every day that we're not working to build a high school, it's gonna cost more and more money for our taxpayers.
If
All
I,
right.
if I
Thank
can
you
have
very-
one, just a little bit of leeway, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, and I want to.
Well, as long as you don't mind if we go over our hour.
No,
Okay.
this is important. I want to just respond to the mayor's response, and I want to make it quite clear to everyone here, as well as the residents that are watching this evening, that I believe everybody, I'm going to start with myself, along with
all my colleagues on the council believe that a school needs to be built. Okay, that is no questions. We need a new high school. It's a necessity for our city to continue to grow and move forward. I personally don't agree with the mayor when he says that this vote is a vote on whether or not we are building a school for our children right now, because there is an option, there's also an option of going back to the existing site, okay, and trying to see if that becomes an option. Now, I understand MSBA, that means, that being said, that we would need to go back to MSBA and ask them if changing the site is going to cause, is going to be a problem, okay? After further discussions with people that are involved in their professional opinion, people seem to think that that isn't, not that it's a guarantee, but it's, I think the MSBA would be willing to do something like that. And like I said, that's no guarantee either. But to sit here and say that that site can't cost an additional $45 million or $30 million, I don't know what that number is. And
Mr. President, I think you heard from Mr. Leonard, an additional $40 million is not, from his professional experience, not on the table. So I think we need to also stop talking about 100 million or 80 million or 60 million. His experience, and I think we have to trust in some of his competence and his ability, is that this will, at worst, cost an extra 15 million. We are in a process where 2 years, as I said, a couple million dollars in soft costs. And nobody's questioning the fact that, at the end of the day, I hear from families all the time who don't even put their own kids in the high school because of the facilities. There are families, good families, that are choosing not to go into the high school because the facilities don't work for them and aren't right. And what we're trying to do is make sure that that is done in the most fiscally prudent way. And we're 10 years into this planning of trying to build a new high school. We're 2 years into feasibility. We've got sunk costs. If the risk is 15 million, that could very well be the amount that we end up spending if we kick this down the road and say we're gonna go back to the old site, which isn't gonna be nearly the type of site that we wanna build on. The school building committee went through this for several years, vetting the pros and cons of the current site versus other sites like Wonderland, like the Housing Authority. That work has been done. And I think it's a little bit frustrating to have all that work be done and have it be ignored, and get to this point where the rubber meets the road and everyone understands what's happening, and we're getting a lot of questions about whether or not we're doing the right thing, and I just want to be very clear that the longer that this takes, the more money it's going to cost. And we're going to continue to see potential cost escalations go on. And we're not even talking about the other impacts. The fact that if we don't build on a site other than the current site, we're going to lose the ability to use the current site as a potential middle school. We're not talking about the impact to education for probably at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 years if we do the reversal, if we get, by some grace of God, we get the MSBA to approve us to continue on with the project and we go back to the current site, there are significant impacts to student learning that will happen for those kids that are being subjected to being on a construction site. Those are all the reasons why we're here with the Wonderland site before you and with the bond authorization. And all that work has been done. And I trust that all of you do want to build a new facility, that you understand, and you've heard from the families who have said, we're not sending our kids to the high school because the facilities don't meet the standards that we have for our own children. and we're gonna fix that. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor McKenna.
Mr. Mayor, will you go back up? So I got a couple of questions. So, and I have a question for you, Mr. Leonard, too. So one of the things that we said in executive session was that we were going to use.
Should we talk about what we said in executive session?
Okay, so, sorry about that. Don't erase that.
Sorry for cutting you off, but I just.
No, well, one of the things that was said was that we were going to use $46 million in revenue from Suffolk Downs. And I know that as of tonight, that Suffolk Downs will not be completed in the Revere site until 2027. There will be some buildings up in 2 years, but the completion of Suffolk Downs in Revere will not be completed until 2007. How are we gonna, what did I say? No? 2000, I'm all over the place, I'm sorry. 5 years, yes. How are we gonna compensate? I know there's a lot of buildings that are going up in Revere Beach, and we're not quite finished with that, and more buildings are coming in. But how are we gonna compensate without that $46 million or whatever we get from Suffolk Downs?
Yeah, and so the chief financial officer can talk a little bit more about the details, and I think you have some of that in your packet about the new growth projected over the course of the next few years. But there is a lot of development. I guess short answer is there's a lot of development happening in the city. Right now we have the capacity to take on this additional debt, and with the Suffolk Downs project, there will be additional capacity. So you mentioned 40 million. That's the projections for everyone's kind of to rehash everyone's memory. Suffolk Downs is projected to generate over $40 million a year in tax revenue annually. So that's every year there'd be 40 plus and growing as time goes on, additional revenue coming to the city. So that will not, there will be money left over from that to after we pay for a bond the size of what we're looking to bond. So and that's not including the other developments that are happening, the beach, as you mentioned. There are other projects that are underway, and that's really, I know there has been some community argument about whether or not development works and whether or not, we can put up with all the things that go along with development in our city. And the result and the fruits of that labor are things like new high schools for our students and for property values, and everyone knows what the communities that build new high schools generally see increases in their value, and there's they become even better places to live. So the short answer is that the new growth that's being created and that's been created, that will continue to be created, allows the city and gives the city the capacity to bond money for the high school. And we're not using all of the money from Suffolk Downs to pay for the high school. And I don't know, Rich, if you want to add to that.
And I just want to say, and I'm glad you're getting up, Rich, because I have a question. But I mean, we are short police, we are short firefighters. We don't have apparatuses. We have Boston filling in for Revere, alerts and fire. We're renting apparatuses. There is so much need in the city for other things. And believe me, we do need a brand-new high school. I agree with that, being a teacher for 32 years. But there are also other needs, and I'd hate to see that revenue, that $40 million, go solely to this, the bonding for this high school. So that's my concern. Rich, I would like to know, is this the total for the existing high school for if we renovate it? Or is that just without the $29 million?
No, the comparison is to build it on the Wonderland site versus building on the existing school fields at the current site.
Without the $29 million, there's really not much of a difference if we put it at Wonderland, it seems like it's less.
There was a savings at
We're
Wonderland.
saving?
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing is, Mr. Leonard, if you could get up, and this is my last question, so I don't want to just keep going. But, so, you know, in this whole process, no one's ever talked about the legal fees, okay? And the legal fees can add up to millions of dollars. I don't care what anybody says. If this court date goes into, and I know you are the best that is around, so I'm sure you're expensive. So, you gotta put, but anyways, I'm asking, when do you see a court date? How long do you think the legal process, the litigation process is gonna go on? Because if it goes on, say, right now, you said it's hard to get a judge, okay? And right now, because of COVID, everything is backed up. So what I'm saying is, what if it's 5 months or 6 months down the line? That's still, you're still gonna get paid, and you know, this is what I wanna know. If there's like an estimate of the legal fees, and how long do you think that the litigation is gonna
I
go on?
From my experience with complicated cases such as this, if they're fully litigated, you're lucky to get this case tried in 3.5 to 4 years. In all probability, you're talking 5 to 5.5 years and maybe longer. The expense of this particular case is really not in the legal fees. I'm not handling this on a reverse contingency fee basis. The problem with this case is you're going to have to hire so many expert witnesses, not only Mr. Beals, who's a land use planner, you're going to have to hire environmental scientists, wetland scientists. You're going to need a panoply of 8 to 10 absolutely outstanding people in their field who are going to charge significant amounts of money. It's a very expensive case to try. And with that, if you go that route, you run the risk. You don't know who the judge is. You don't know who's going to be on the jury. You don't know what the economic situation is in the country at that point in time. And so it's really, it's unknowable, except for it's an extremely expensive endeavor. And it's an expensive endeavor for both sides, which is an inducement for the plaintiff to try to reach a reasonable accommodation rather than spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on engineers and other experts. I don't know whether that's helpful, but that's
No,
the honest truth.
That's helpful, but on top of that $29 million that we're gonna take it by eminent domain, you're talking about another substantial amount of money to hire.
Well, in terms of experts and legal fees, I would be astounded if they exceeded $750,000, $800,000. I'd be astounded. There's only so much you can do, but you have to hire the experts to do the studies.
And just one quick note on that, there is an amount that was, and I think the CFO can attest to this, there was an amount that we had baked into the bond authorization. We ran this by bond counsel to have some legal fees that would be inside of that. So when you say on top of, it's not really, there is some leeway, and I don't know the exact amount, but there's an amount for legal fees that was in that bond authorization.
Thank you. Councilor Zambudo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was about to jump out of my chair a few times here. I apologize for glaring at you over there. He can attest to it right here. But with all due respect to my friend, the mayor, you were the reason I was going to jump out of the chair. How dare you say you were going to protect the taxpayers? Now, I've said before, I'm going back on the record again tonight, that this is the biggest fiscal mistake in the history of the city, is taking a piece of property at Wonderland off the tax rolls. Now, we talked about growth from Suffolk Downs. Well, you're going to use the growth from Suffolk Downs that was supposed to relieve the tax base. Now you've taken a potential growth factor off you've taken a piece of property off the tax rolls. Now, that's not what this meeting's about tonight, so I'll leave it at that. But it is positively the biggest fiscal mistake in the history of the city for the taxpayers. And I dare say, if I poll the citizens, they'll be on my side. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm trying to save us from ourselves here. Now, the other point is, with all due respect to Mr. Leonard, and I'm sure he's an excellent attorney, and he has some assumptions about the owners of Wonderland. I disagree with that, and it comes from some hearsay from people who have spoken to the owners of the property. I'm not looking for debate on this, but what I will say is I've been up here 22 years, and I've had a lot of experts come up here and promise me what was going to happen, and I dare say that's not what happened. Now, I wasn't here for the vote to sue TD Video, but some of my colleagues that are now gone decided that was a smart thing to do, and they had advice from outside attorneys that were supposed experts, and it ended up costing the city millions of dollars. So, with all due respect to the assumptions being made by the experts, I've been there, done that, and I can't just take that as a face value. My opinion is, on the issue now, on the bond issue, that this is a fraudulent bond at $30 million. It should be at least double that, and I can't support it in any way. So I know I'm going to get all the, and I'm not looking for you to filibuster, Mr. Mayor. You've done a lot of that tonight. Very good. You've come a long way. It's beautiful, but I don't want to hear it. I have my point of view, and my point of view is based in fact. It's not based in any kind of, bull crap. The money that it's going to take to build this high school is going to come from growth at Suffolk Downs. Not all the growth, but the fact is that Wonderland will have no growth anymore because we took it off the tax rolls. That's my case, and that's all I got to say.
Counselor, with all due respect, when you talk about fraudulent and, I appreciate your institutional knowledge. I understand that you have an opinion, but when you throw words out like fraudulent, you are, feeding the folks that watch these meetings who, may not understand all the work that gets done. Nothing that anyone on my team has done has been fraudulent.
Okay.
So I just want to, I want to set the record straight on that and
So
just say,
wait a minute.
Politics aside, I know
All
you've
right.
got your
This is
one-liners
not
in.
about politics.
You've got your one-liners in. The fact is, we've done our due diligence. This isn't 40 years ago with a porn store. We're talking about a high school. We're talking about being able to move forward on a project, and we don't agree, and that's okay. I respect that.
All right,
You respect that, but don't say what we're doing.
Wait a minute.
Don't say what we're doing is fraudulent.
Wait a minute.
That's all.
I'll
Thank you.
take back fraudulent and say it's misinformed, okay? I'll give you misinformed. And it's not actual. We're trying to bond $29 million, and I'll bet my left arm that it's not the real number. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, well, thank you.
Does the
Who's
mayor
gonna-
have to give an arm as well?
Mr.
if he
Mayor,
loses?
who's going to take it off?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. My point is that I don't think we're ready to vote on the bond here because the facts are just not here to back it up. And I cannot vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank you for the leeway. I know I'm not on the committee. But I believe that if we're going to speak in what ifs and what could potentially happen and we could possibly pay more, I think we also have to weigh out the landowner. And do they want to wait 5.5 to 6 years for $15 more million that it's going to be divvied up and portion of it paid out? Is it worth the wait? We need a new high school now. It has to be built, and it's on us. By delaying this now, we're only going to cost us more money. as Rich Viscay just said to us, our CFO, building on the current site was costing us more. And so the idea is to build on the current site, which is going to cost us more. And it just isn't adding up. We had a chance to delay this back when we took the vote. We all agreed unanimously to take the property. Now when it comes time to pony up the money, we're going to put a roadblock up. I don't think now's the time. I don't think now's the place. And if I may, I'm not sure if I'm even able to ask this, but is all the acres of land buildable on that site?
Just short answer, no.
Right.
There's a number of wetland issues. There are wetland issues. There are issues with the MBTA rail that we'd have to have a setback from. And so, no, we talk about 30 acres or 33 acres. This is a 33 acres that is sitting, without any floodplain issues or anything like that. It's in fact been sitting there 10 years without generating any revenue. So, that's part of the reason why I think, Mr. Leonard kind of touched on it in our appraisal. When we went through our appraisal, you take those things, those discounts in the development world. I see some of my developer friends in the house. They would tell you there are discounts that come along with a property that isn't permitted a certain way. It has floodplain issues, has other wetlands issues, has issues with the MBTA rail. So those are discounts that get taken into account when you do an appraisal. And that's all part of the work that was shared with everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the reason I asked that question is because I actually had the privilege to sit in a meeting with the mayor, with one of the most prestigious, well-known commercial developers in the state, maybe the country. And the only thing that they could give us on that site was a parking lot. And it was going to bring in 1,600 plus Amazon vans. And I will take that trade any day for a school for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, right off the bat, I want everybody to know that I am in favor of this. I look for it to happen. Now, everybody has always said that in order to get something good, you have to spend some money. And to me, taking this property is the best thing for a $400 million school. And not in any order, but just, everybody was talking about the kids. I think the access for kids will be a lot better because you have a set of traffic lights down there, pedestrian lights at Wonderland Plaza across the street. And there will be a crosswalk there for them, for my kids in Ward 2, and kids from Ward 1 that like walking, can cross the street easier and safer. Right now, they don't have a spot to cross. They cross at Bell Circle across the highway. They wait for the lights to change red before they move across the median strip. They walk in the middle of the median strip. Kids will be kids. They go as the crow flies. And I think once we get down there, the access and safety for the pedestrian of the kids will be a lot better. That's number one. Number two, is there going to be a long-term price on this? Yes, it is. But we're looking for long-term good schools. And this is going to it's not going to take care of the kids for the next 6 or 7 years. But the kids beyond that are going to get a fairly new school and an up-to-date school. So that's another thing. Regarding the commuter rail, kids that may want to go the other way, if we wanted to when we get the commuter rail, there's going to be a walkover. And we have a paper street going through with the Amazon property and the hotel property. It's a place for the kids to walk. Unfortunately, we have to work on American Legion Highway and see what we can do over there. There's ways to do things and get them done. I am glad to hear that we've had discussions with the property owners, because the last time we met, there was no discussions at all. So I think that's very positive, and I'm glad there's some site that they want to go towards to try and make this thing happen. Now, one thing I want to ask, when we go to court and we go to take the money, is this considered a lawsuit or just an appeal to land court? On the money to determine how much money it was going to pay? Push a button.
Sorry, thank you. I'll learn one of these days. It's a lawsuit, and it's not in the land court. There's exclusive jurisdiction in the Massachusetts Superior Courts, here, Middlesex Superior Court.
Okay, thank you. And another question I have is, once we take this land and saying it does go into court, can we start working on the property in the meantime?
Yes, once you take the property, once the order of taking is recorded, you own the property, and you can begin working on the property. I should mention, and I would do it in executive session, there are some circumstances which I don't foresee in this particular case, where if the validity of the taking was challenged, you may not have at least good judgment may indicate you don't want to develop the property until that issue is determined.
Two more
I don't want to say much more, but I think you see where I'm going. That
Thank
has
you.
not been an issue as of the present time in our discussions with the ownership.
Thank you. And two more small points, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about monies and what can be used. You have to realize that all the construction going on in the city of Revere we get millions of dollars on permit fees. And this is additional money we have to go into our coffers to help somewhat pay for things and do other things other than just pay for the school. So, and my last thing is, if I went to court and I look at the 12 jurors, I would say that the jurors would pick the kids over a developer or the owner of a property.
If I can, that's a very interesting point, because in many of the cases where I've litigated, the use to which the property is being put, here, a school, there can be no more of a bona fide public purpose than a school, and the jurors generally are more sympathetic to the taking authority than if it was going to be flipped to some other developer to make a zillion dollars developing it commercially.
Right. And one last thing, Mr. Chairman. If in chance we give them 6, 7, or 8 acres of land, will that reduce that appeal number?
Yes, it would. It would reduce the total fair market value of the property taken, because you'd only be taking 20 to 22 acres rather than 30 acres plus.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your latitude.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I appreciate it, and I know there might be some follow-up questions, but I just wanted to make my point of view heard here tonight, as I did at our last meeting. And I come down on the same side as my colleague, Councilor Zambudo, and I have the same concerns as Council President Visconti about the unknowns. I didn't have the luxury or the privilege of participating in these executive sessions. I wasn't sitting here on the council at that time, so I'm not privy to those. I was not in executive session with you. But in any case, you know, I do want to acknowledge that we need a new high school. There's no question about that. I think what we're determining right now, and I think the primary function of this city council, any city council, is to provide fiscal oversight. That's why we're here, to represent the taxpayers. And when you try, I think it's political when you're pitting kids against the taxpayers. This isn't a political discussion. This is about the city's ability to go forward. This is the largest single appropriation to the tax levy in the city's history. I think it deserves a little bit of conversation. I don't think anybody's out of line with having that discussion. Now, you think back, I think back to 2012, when the land over in Everett, a polluted site, the original price tag on that was $75 million, same size as Wonderland. And that was a polluted site. One of the reasons the casino wound up going to Everett was because of their commitment to clean the site. It was lowered down to $35 million because of some problems with land ownership. But the original, this was in 2012, was $75 million. Now, recently, Link Logistics, a subsidiary of Blackstone, just paid anywhere between $3 and $5 million an acre for the global property on Lee Burbank Highway. And, you know, so I understand you're using the comps that Suffolk Downs used back in 2015, 2016, 2017, okay? But, you know, I mean, it's a different time. And now we have different interest rates that we're talking about. A lot of things can change. So when it comes to the value that's going to be placed on this property, I mean, at one time, Wonderland Dog Track was the largest and #1 taxpayer in the city of Revere. So for anyone to sit here and kind of downplay the value of that property, I think is not thinking clearly. That was our largest taxpayer in the city for decades. So, you know, there is the fear of the unknown. And by the way, I understand the building committee worked on this for a long time. You came down, everybody voted for it, and I understand that. And I'm only one counselor. I'm only one vote. So it's not going to be based on how I feel about it. I recognize that. It's not about how I feel. But I will say this. I don't agree with the site selection, and I understand that this isn't a site selection discussion, it's a monetary discussion. But in that, you know, part of my feeling on why the way I feel that I do is I don't believe that it's the best site for a high school. Now, nobody is more committed, and I know the two of us that actually spoke or are speaking in this manner were part from the very beginning of a 5-school building program that we supported strongly way back in the early 2000s. And we built 5 new schools. We stayed committed to that. This isn't about we don't want kids to go to school. We don't want to have a 21st century education. When I was mayor, I see Ms. Ty here. I mean, and Ms. Kelly. And, you know, in 2014, the National Center for Urban School Transformation voted us the #1 high school in the country. So I don't think there's anyone, and I'll speak for myself, more dedicated and more proud of our school department and our children and our administrators and our teachers than I am. But I just find this to be, in addition to the cost, the unknowns, the lost economic opportunities for the city. We're talking about in the same breath about how Suffolk Downs is going to pay for this, but yet we're taking a valuable piece of property off of our tax rolls that could pay for other projects down the road. We're still under a consent decree by the Department of Justice, and I know the mayor earlier talked about how we're doing all this infrastructure work, and we are, and we have to be committed to it. We're legally bound to it. And by the way, it's great public policy because nobody wants to be flooded. So I totally understand that, but when you look at the value, we talked about one comp, which was Suffolk Downs, but we're not talking about other comps. We're not talking about these recent comps. And these are going to be, I think, very strong basis of discussions when it ultimately gets challenged. Unless, I see you shaking your head, Mr. Leonard. Do you have, feel free.
I do. With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not involved in Revere issues and Revere politics, you have a vacant site at Wonderland that has been available for development for 10 years. They haven't developed a shed on that property. It's a piece of vacant land. A comparable sale for an eminent domain taking of vacant land is other vacant land, hence the use of the Wonderland site. You can't legally compare the value of Wonderland Park to the Necco site, to the Amazon site, to the Beecham Street site. All of these, the Necco site had a 830,000 square foot building. That's not comparable to the subject property. I don't care if it sold for $5 million a square foot. It makes no difference. These concept sales that are being relied on, I believe, by the plaintiff in this case, even though there's not technically a plaintiff, is the argument you're making. In my view, these sales do not get into evidence on a valuation of vacant land. The Necco site with an $830,000 building has no relation to the fair market value of this site. And I think that applies. I'm not going to waste time going through all of these things.
Right,
I don't want to
right.
debate with you. But
Right.
I do think a comparable sale is comparable based upon what the property is used for at the time of the taking, what its possibility is at the time of the taking for its highest and best use, and taking sales that have Amazon buildings on them and $830,000 investment buildings are not admissible in the Superior Court on the value of the subject property.
I appreciate that, and I don't want to go back and forth either, sir. I'm just saying that, you know, if the land is so, really does not have the value that maybe they think it does, it's surprising to me that they wouldn't want to just sell it right away. I don't know what leverage they think they have. If they have leverage, it must be based on something. I don't know what that is. But anyway, the bottom line is, the cost for the land, I mean, we haven't even talked, I'm looking at this proposal here about, building a new school at the existing site. Let me just back up for 1 second, okay? I understand the urgency, but as the mayor alluded to, we've been talking about this for a long time. It's true, we were talking about this during the last administration. We're talking about it now 8 years later. We're trying to get it done. But I'm more concerned about getting it done correctly and the best way for the students and the best way for the taxpayers than I am just for the sense of urgency so we can hurry up and build it. This is going to stand presumably for another 40 or 50 years before we have to go through this drill again and maybe build another high school at that same site or another site. So, to me, I would rather do it correctly and do it the right way. I look at this and it says, we never investigated, and I don't know, Mr. Dakin's here, we never investigated adding on to the existing high school like they did in Winchester. We never discussed it. And so I don't know what the downfall of that was.
Mr. Chairman, you were on the council when we were in executive session, when we discussed this.
Well, I
this
was not in
document.
executive
This has
session.
been available to you for 3 weeks. You've yet
Did you send that
to
out
take a
to
look
us?
at it.
Did you send that out to us?
It's been available to you for
Avail-
the
how-
last 3 weeks.
How would we know it's
Anyway,
available, Mr. Mayor? How
All
would we know it's
of the
available?
work that's been done through the school building committee has been exactly around what you're talking about. What impacts are there, not only from a financial standpoint, what impacts are there to a neighborhood? What impacts are there to school learning on the current site? We've done, all that work has been done. You have not been a part of it. That's fine, and you haven't taken the time to understand it. But we're here now.
Mr.
where
Mayor,
the rubber meets the road,
Mr. Mayor,
and
I take
this has not
exception to
been-
the way you're talking right
This
now.
has not been.
If you want to be
we're not rushing
condescending, I'm
anything.
not interested in listening
We
to
are not
it.
rushing anything. We are.
I mean, I
we
think
are
that's-
doing
I think that's
the
very
best-
unprofessional, to
The
be
best
honest with
project for the city and for the students.
Mr.
This is
Chairman,
what the
yeah.
project is.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman,
Councilor Morabito.
we're 20 minutes into our city council meeting.
all right.
Can we hear from the people that are here
wait a
to
minute,
speak as
Mr.
well?
Can I just make one point?
State your point, Councilor.
Do I still have?
We're talking about a cost savings at Wonderland. What about the $1 billion we're taking off the tax roll? A cost saving of a few $100,000, I want it where it is. If it can be built where it is and go up a couple of stories, you're not taking property off the tax roll. Common sense.
Thank you, Councilor.
If they're paying their taxes. Can we hear from the people, Mr. Chairman?
If they
in the
would like to
audience?
speak, do councilors have questions specifically for them? Councilor Keefe, I know you had a couple.
Mr. Chairman, I did speak earlier. I think everyone had a good chance to speak a lot, well, except for Councilor Morabito, had more opportunity to speak than I did. I think I respect everyone up here, and you're doing a great job, and everyone has an opinion. That's the great thing about having 11 of us. I do disagree with $1 billion, and I say that, Councilor Zambudo, with all due respect, because, again, I don't have no, but I'm not going to debate you here on this, but ultimately, I'm not even going to, that wasn't even going to be my conversation. The valuation of the site is what it's used for. So, and again, we know this, the casino in Everett was valued at $75 million because it was being used for a casino. Suffolk Downs was worth a lot of money when it was used as a racetrack. Wonderland was used as a racetrack. it can't be used as these. So the valuation is what you can put to use. Right now, the Wonderland site, the valuation and what it can be used for is not what its value. That's why there's no value, because it can't really be used for much. We know that. So we need zoning changes, it would need to be special permits, all that. So the valuation is based off of what it can be used for. That is fact, okay? The other piece is just so we do know, and for edification, I don't expect 11 councilors to have read that book. I gotta be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, I was part of these meetings. I was part of it, so I haven't really read that, but I do know a good amount of it because I have been part of this for the last 2 years, as well as Councilor Visconti, and I feel like I'm making a very educated decision. I did have some concern. I feel like our attorney here is representing us well, and he's quelled a lot of my concern with his valuations and the fact-finding that he's done. But the biggest factor on not building at current site was the disruptive learning to the 2 to 3 years of students. You can't really put a price tag on that. We shut schools down for a year. I disagreed with it. I stood up here and I fought against it. I was called every name in the book. And what the impact it's made to students and will make to students years to come, you can't put a price tag on that. So there's another, again, let's disrupt the learning again for 2 to 3 years, maybe more. And that's, what's the price tag on that? Secondly, we all know this. If anyone's ever built a house, there's some people in the audience, if anyone's ever replaced a bathroom in their house, you build a brand new bathroom from the stud, it's a lot less than replacing a bathroom. We know that. Just like a house, they'd rather start on a clean slate. So that was one of the biggest factors in choosing the Wonderland site. You're starting on a clean canvas, you know what you're getting yourself into, rather than getting into the refurbishments and or building on site that you're not really very familiar with. And then what's really not even in here, the cost is pretty neutral. It's actually less on the Wonderland site, with the exception as MSBA doesn't replace the cost of the land acquisition. We know that. The big factor is, it doesn't even factor in you take the fields, you take what does it cost to build a brand new turf soccer field right now? We built a brand new football stadium, that was a stadium, $7 million. If you built that stadium today, it's probably $15 million. So a brand new turf soccer field, probably gonna be $3 to $5 million. All right, just to replace the turf alone is a couple $100,000. Build a whole new soccer field, let's just say $3 million conservatively. Build a brand new baseball field, $1 million with lights, maybe $1 million too. There isn't lights right now, but you know what I mean. So there's a lot of soft costs that aren't even factored into that when you take over that space, because you have to eventually find that and put that somewhere else. That's where this all came into that balance. No, Wonderland was not the first site selected, but it was whittled down to that site. And that's why we're making the best, over a 2-year process, that's the best decision we've come to. A lot of really great people on that panel, including Mr. Dakin, whose father worked for the schools and was the superintendent of schools for many years, including Diane Kelly, including the principals of the schools, including city council members, including school committee members, including members of the public and members in these building trades. So ultimately, I know that if you're the chair, if you want to make this another meeting, I'm okay with that. It's an expensive decision. We're making a $29 million decision today. There's a buffer, I agree. I think that the mayor, I don't know why he'd bet his arm with you, but I think that he feels pretty confident, so I have to trust that there's a lot of really good people behind you. And I don't trust easily, so I would just say that I think I'm going to be in support of this. I get everyone's hesitation. Everyone has a right to their hesitation. Everyone's done really good things for the community. This is going to be a really great thing for the community. So I'll be in support of it, and I appreciate your leeway. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Councilor Keefe, and I appreciate Council President Visconti. He had alluded to earlier, this is an important meeting, and I'm glad that we were allowed to go over. And I appreciate your support, Councilor Keefe, in trying to get more questions answered. I don't think we need to rush this through on a vote here tonight. I'd like to leave it in committee, potentially have another meeting, get more of our questions that are answered. We can only get to so many in an hour, talking about a 30 million plus litigation cost down the road in 1 hour. So I think we owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the residents. Because at the end of the day, this has to get paid for. That's my concern. I'm not a teacher. I'm not going to be giving the kids their education going down the road. But what I have to do is know that when I ultimately vote for this, that it's going to be something that the city can afford going forward, and that the taxpayers can go afford, what can't afford. I asked Mr. Viskey at the last meeting, will this require a debt exclusion or a Proposition 2.5 override? And we didn't have the answer to that, and I'm still not sure we have the answer to that. I mean, if you could state definitively that we will definitely not need a Prop 2.5 override and definitively not need a debt exclusion, that could be helpful in some ways.
Yeah, I think I did answer that. As of right now, we have no intention on doing a debt exclusion or an override. I did provide some financials to speak on the matter. To Council McKenna's point, over $40 million worth of growth at the Suffolk Downs over the next 20 years should support what we're talking about. If I just round the numbers up, $2 million of land acquisition. If you want to double it and call it $4 million, if there's some kind of litigation, and then you have another $15 million worth of high school debt. That'll be around 19 or 20 million. Will 20 million be supported by 40 million? Sure. There certainly are a lot of factors that go into that, especially the timing of the development when that new growth hits. And like I said before, there is a lot to talk about, but we also got to talk about the opportunities lost. I mean, we're talking about $153 million of MSBA reimbursement that we could be risking. So we should be talking about those risks as well. And the other thing is, I go back and forth because I feel like I got a lot to lose if this thing ends up a real issue with the valuation or the cost escalations. But, I hear for years that there's so much development in the city and we need to slow it down. We got to curb development. So you have a nice piece of land over there. What better use than a high school? If you don't want apartments, you don't want a soccer stadium, you don't want something else. I mean, what better use than a high school for the kids for 50 years? I think there's, you heard from Mr. Leonard said there might be some land that could be carved off. That land could generate enough money to pay for the land acquisition. Now we're right back to where we were in the first place. So, like Councilor Keefe said, we've been at this for 2 years. This isn't the greatest place, but it's the greatest place in the city right now to build this high school, and I'm convinced of that. And as the point right now, I don't think we need an override or debt exclusion. I mean, things
So
can
we
change.
definitely, the city will definitely not need a Prop 2.5 override or debt exclusion.
Not with the financial information that I've given you at the current point. Again, assuming that all the costs come in at where we estimate as of October 24th.
Right, no
2022.
future pandemics, no future anything like that, right?
I can't predict the future, but
Right.
yes, my job
Right.
with the mayor and everybody else
Okay.
is to really, hopefully, get this thing off the ground, start to get a little more information on the site, start to get some bids put together and really, plan the work and work the plan. So,
Well,
I feel a little
I-
intimidated up here saying that I definitely don't need an override or debt exclusion, but we are not
I
planning
don't
on
blame
it.
you. In all honesty, I don't blame you for feeling a little intimidated,
But I'll
Mr.
say it,
Viskey.
and I'm on
I
record,
don't.
so if that was one of the issues, then I'd like to at least clarify it, that we have no intention right now of doing a debt exclusion override for this, based upon what we know about the development in the city. Again, on top of that would be permitting fees, the revenues from meals tax, rooms tax, excise tax. Our pension obligation drops off in 2034. There's a lot of factors, and I think we'll be before this council, for years to come, talking about how we're gonna make this work, but I support it, and I hope you do as well.
Thank you. We've gone over time. I know that I still have, I think Councilor Zambudo had indicated he has more questions. I've got some more questions. I don't think there's been a 10-year discussion. I think we can wait another meeting on this and then maybe pull it out of committee at that point.
If I could just address that point. So as you know, timelines are very tight with the MSBA, and we have a strict deadline that we've mapped backwards, that we have to have paperwork to them in December, which means we need to be getting on that land in the next week. If we're beyond another week of getting access to the land, our hope is that this would be voted tonight, that we could file the notice of taking with the state, that they would approve it, and that we could get on the land next week and start doing soil samples and other pieces. Brian can probably speak to this better than I can, but the bottom line is that we can't wait until another meeting unless we want to push the whole project out. And then we're back at the same place talking about months from now, things are going to be more expensive than they are right now. The MSBA has their approval meetings only 4 times a year. And if we don't have paperwork to them by December, it means that they won't take it up at their March meeting. That pushes us to a June meeting. And so I know this is such an incredibly difficult decision that you all have to make. I don't envy any of you right now trying to weigh all of this because it is a long-term decision for the city of Revere. But I would implore you to please take it up tonight if there's an inclination to move forward with this.
Well, if there's an inclination not to move forward, then that could be a vote that you might not want. I'm not sure where everybody stands right now. I don't know. I mean,
I don't know
we have-
either, right.
With all due
questions.
respect to the superintendent, Mr. Chairman, I believe that this needs another meeting.
I mean,
Can
we're
I-
always
excuse-
pushed to the
Point-
sense of urgency.
Mr.
Point-
Chairman, okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, can I ask, the next council meeting is scheduled when?
November, and we have till December to get them the paperwork. I don't understand why that's,
We have to be on the site in a week to make the deadline.
So just a quick update on that. The process that gets us to a schematic design submission, first off, has to include site access. One of the reasons you don't have final schematic design budget numbers in front of you is that to give you those, we need to get on the site, we need to do geotechnical test borings, we need to delineate wetlands, we need a real survey. We're working off historic surveys and aerial surveys because we are not allowed to get to the site. That all takes time. We have people scheduled in the coming days to get there, pending a positive vote here. Now, if we absolutely need every day we have between now and December 28th to get the package in then. If we can't move it forward today, with the city, we'll be requesting an extension for the feasibility study with the MSBA. We've already asked for one of those. One's been granted. The reason we asked for that extension was the complexity of this taking process and the amount of time it took. As Attorney Leonard said, this is a phenomenally complex site. If there's a permit in the state or the country that you need to pull to build at this site, this project needs to do it. And really the big thing is we cannot lock down the schematic design pricing that we'll have to live by for the duration of this project for the next 5 years until we get on that site and test. So if we aren't moving forward tonight, I really would need to know from a project perspective when we do plan on moving forward, either yes or no. And to be able to communicate that to the MSBA. Because either of those, if we can't make December 28th, which we need access in the next week or so, we need to get permission from MSBA to move that deadline. If it's a straight up no vote to not take Wonderland, we need permission from them to revert back to the other site and repeat the last two phases we've done. So a delay or a no requires a response from MSBA. A yes tonight gets us to the finish line of schematic design in December, and we're holding right now a summer 2027 opening of that building with students and seats. So any option that's not that is probably not 2027 moving.
so if I could just say, mistaken, and by the way, I had the great privilege of working with your father. We both cut the ribbon on the New Hill School. It was a wonderful day, and I think there's still, I think that school's, it came out great. And in fact, I think all the schools that we undertook all came out great. We just got, last week, we held a meeting tonight on it, but typically, a lot of times, we won't hold a subcommittee meeting for a few weeks or something like that if there's other meetings involved. We just got this bond authorization last week, and now we're up against deadlines. I don't understand that. I mean, was it unforeseen? You didn't know that the paperwork, and I'm not saying you, but we just got this request last week. And now we're expected, tonight, urgent, we need to vote on this, on such a large decision. It's, to me, in all honesty, we're put in these situations a lot, and I'm not saying that all by you or by the school department, but in general, it's always, we need the vote tonight. Well, why did we get the bond authorization public hearing last week? I don't know either.
Point of personal privilege.
With all due respect, we have been at this for 2 years.
I know you have, Mr. Mayor. I know.
We
Why did we get the bond authorization,
We got the
public hearing
bond authorization
last week?
You were not at executive session. You were not here.
I know I'm not this and I'm not that, but why did we get the request last week?
We voted, the city council voted in January to pick the site. You were not here for that vote.
January, okay.
Right, so we picked Wonderland.
Okay,
And we had an appraisal that was being done through that process. We do our due diligence.
And when was the
The
appraisal done?
was given the day of the executive session, 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Which, perfect timing. We then, by open meeting law and by the laws of bond authorizations, posted the bond authorization as soon as we could, as soon as the appraisal was done. The appraisal was done, it was given to the council before it was actually made public. If you had been there, you would know that we had
Mr.
that.
Mayor, you know,
And-
for you
well,
to try to,
but
for
at
you
the
to
end
try
of
to
the
say
day-
that I don't do my job, your little game
You have to
here
show up to do your
is
job.
getting really
You have to
boring.
you have to show up to
It's
do your
really
job.
boring.
Can we stop, please?
Stop this?
Can we stop?
This is,
Can I make,
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Do my job.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Tell the truth. Yes.
I apologize for this, and certainly am not taking sides here, but I don't want to witness the potential loss of time. And I know that there are some councilors that are still hesitant, but as a member of this group, the committee, I'd like to put a motion in to take a roll call.
That's fine, members of the committee. What's the roll call? The approval of the loan order?
Please.
I would prefer keeping it in committee. I really would. I think the next meeting, we should. What's the roll call on, what is it?
The roll
That
call-
we take a vote?
Yes, correct, to take a vote.
To take a vote? Or keep it in committee,
Out of-
okay.
Out of concern that
All right,
out of
Okay,
concern that
take a
this.
roll call.
Well, we'll take that then, Council President Visconti. See what, I mean, okay, we'll go for it.
Take a roll
We'll go
call
for it
on
then.
whether or not to keep it.
If you want it to go
No,
out of committee.
a roll call on approval of the bond.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
I-
Yeah.
I would, are we able to, a subsequent roll call? Is that what?
Yes, wait, this
and-
isn't the
and-
vote. This is just the subcommittee. And he wants a vote of the subcommittee in terms of who's in favor and who isn't. Well, not about taking it in committee or out of committee. I think this is just a vote of the committee.
I think we could,
So,
Just be clear what this vote is.
can somebody,
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chairman, my,
Councilor Novoselsky.
my thought and recommendation is that we vote on this favorably through the committee and bring it out on the floor of the council.
So the vote here is, if you want to call the roll, Madam Clerk, the vote is, shall the, yes, yes.
On the motion by Council Novoselsky to offer a favorable recommendation to the full city council to approve the loan order in the amount of $29,500,000 for the Wonderland property acquisition. Councilor Keefe?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Novoselsky?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Powers?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sereno is absent. Council President Visconti?
yes.
Yes. And Chairman Rizzo?
No.
No. The Ways and Means Committee has offered a favorable recommendation to the full city council.
Okay. That will conclude the Subcommittee on Ways and Means. We'll now go, I would imagine, take a couple-minute recess and go into our regular meeting. Thank you.